say SIOP. How to drive revenue, profitability, and cash flow. My name is Julie Dorr, and I will be your moderator for today's event. Our presentation will last approximately 40 minutes with the remaining time available for your questions. Feel free to type in your questions in the designated question or chat section on the right. It's typically on the right side of your computer. And I will be happy to answer those, or have Lisa answer those at the very end of the session for today's webinar. Before we get started, though, please note that this webinar and all the accompanying materials are protected by copyright and that the entire conference is being recorded. This presentation provides general information only and does not address your specific situation. So let's get started by welcoming today's expert and recently named to SAP as the top 20 supply chain influencer, Lisa Anderson. Lisa, congratulations.
Thank you.
Also known as the Manufacturing Connector and is the founder and president of LMA Consulting Group, which specializes in optimizing manufacturing with that eagle eye production precision and a pragmatic approach to execution. A futurist and big believer in building networks in person and virtually, Lisa has authored a number of SIOP articles and also spoken on this topic and will be our presenter for today's webinar. Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you if you would like to get started.
Sure. All right. Well, welcome to our webinar on SIOP. And we'll go to today's agenda. So why focus on, we'll talk first about why focus on SIOP, why care about SIOP, and then why this is especially critical in today's new normal business environment. Then we'll go into what is SIOP exactly, what are SIOP best practices, and we'll talk about a couple of case studies as time permits and answer your questions. All right, so why sales, inventory, and operations planning? Why focus on this business process? I think this slide captures all the reasons that any company would want to focus on this. If you look at what are the main objectives that all companies are looking for from a performance perspective, you're going to look at cash flow, efficiencies, which is going to go back to margins, sales revenue, and of course service and quality, which also will go back to improving your sales revenues and your margins. So SIOP, or Sales and Operations Planning, which it's sometimes called as well, affects all of these significantly. So as you can see, cash flow and service quality are significant impacts and also a high level of impact. Whereas efficiencies and sales revenues also have a high level of impact, slightly smaller than cash flow and service quality, but it impacts all four key areas of any business substantially. So, and it also, the left side column here talks about non-discretionary projects. So when you have to implement a project just to support your business, whether or not it improves cash flow, efficiency, sales revenue, etc., that's where those go. And it actually does impact this area as well from an infrastructure or service perspective. Sort of like an ERP project would fall into this category. So we have significant improvements when you look at implementing sales, inventory, and operations planning. Of course, it's not a no-brainer, and the reason it affects all of these areas is that it is a significant cultural change. But we'll talk more about that. But if nothing else, we know that we can definitely make some significant improvements by working on sales, inventory, and operations planning. So now, why now? I'm calling this environment that we're in today as the new normal business environment. Post-recession, we're in the recovery, in essence. Why does SIOP matter now? Of course, it's an important thing to work on at any time because absolutely, like I said, business doesn't want those types of improvements. But why is it especially important now? Well, take a step back and look at the latest trends that I'm seeing. I work with manufacturers and distributors, for the most part, with companies that range in value from about $10 million in gross sales to multi-billion-dollar companies. And so I watch for what are key trends that are occurring. And if I notice any trends that are occurring across all my clients, I take note, because if nothing else, it's something that my clients can either leverage and take advantage of the opportunity, or it's something to be aware of. So currently, I'm seeing that certainly volatility has become the new norm. And what I mean by that is you can just look at the stock market as an example to get an idea. Pre-recession, a 100-point move in the stock market was a really big deal. Now it's just commonplace. We don't even notice a 100-point move anymore. And that's just an example that we all might be able to relate to, but that's definitely happening at all my clients. Every day that I walk into a client or one of the trade associations that I lead, something is happening, and significant changes often happen from day to day. Customers were going out of business, customers were demanding significant changes, suppliers, just all sorts of volatility. So we have to become proficient at handling the volatility, which of course SIOP is one tool and process that will help us do that. Also, customers' expectations are really high. They are looking for more for less and quicker. I mean, after all, who wouldn't? So if you think about it from a consumer perspective, since we're all consumers, since the recession, we probably either lost our job, know somebody that lost a job, took a pay cut, or at least had some non-paid time off, or know somebody who did. And so I haven't yet found anyone that hasn't at least known somebody with that situation. And so when you look at it, we have become more concerned about where we're spending our money. And even though we're out of the recession now and are in recovery mode, we're still more concerned about where we're spending our money. After all, it's a volatile environment. Who knows what will happen tomorrow? So what I'm noticing is that we as consumers have become more demanding. We're suddenly expecting Sunday deliveries from Amazon, and this is just sort of commonplace. Well, the same thing is happening across my clients. Customers are definitely expecting things more rapidly. They also are expecting more for less, and their expectations are just elevated. And of course, SIOP that's one of the key focus areas, and it's one of the reasons why I've seen such an increase in the number of companies looking at sales and operations planning, is because they have these significant customer expectations. Time matters. I sort of talked about that a bit in terms of lead times. In today's environment, what I'm seeing at my clients is, so long as they are in the ballpark in terms of pricing, time is what makes the difference. So even if they charge a little bit more, it just doesn't matter if they can consistently deliver products and consistently deliver them quicker than the competition. Time just matters. And that's just true for executives too. What executive do we not know that is overloaded with too many things to do in a day, too many things to do in an hour? So time is of the essence. Closing quickly, closing rapidly after month end is critical. How do we make good business decisions? So time matters across the board. We're also in a new ballgame for sales growth. And so as I said about the customers' expectations changing since the recession, in this case, it just coincides with the recovery from the recession, but we are in this period of time where the baby boomers are beginning to retire. And actually, as they're getting more comfortable as we emerge from the recession, I'm seeing them drop off a bit quicker because they've decided that, after all, I've made some of my money back and it's a good time to retire. But either way, it doesn't matter if they're retiring slow or fast. The idea is that our largest population group ever is beginning to retire. And as people retire, they stop spending as much money. They're looking at, wow, we're in volatile times. We have to at least conserve a bit. It's also just demographically known that people that are in retirement aren't typically upgrading houses, aren't typically supporting large families, aren't typically purchasing diapers and saving for college education. I mean, they may still support a few children. That's becoming a little bit more common, but the children aren't having all those needs. They're typically older. So we're definitely in a new ballgame for sales growth, because what happens is that since our economy is based on consumption, 70% of GDP is focused on consumption, then as we consume less, it's a bit of a problem for improving your, for growing sales. So you have to become, better than your competition and find new ways and innovative ways to stand out in the crowd if you want to grow at the rates that you grew pre-recession. And that's going to be a challenge anyway, because pre-recession, although the sales folks on the phone may argue at this point, but it's just making a dramatic point for an effect, is that previously you could somewhat pick up the phone and receive orders. That is no longer the case. You have to outperform your competition and do a lot more things, provide higher service, etc. Of course, it was never that easy, but it's so much less easy now than it was in the past. Also, cash is king. So, of course, during the recession, few people had cash, so it was king. And now that we're out of the recession, actually a lot of my clients, especially we'll just say a lot of clients across the board have cash, but they're not interested in spending the cash because they're still concerned about the volatility. I am starting to see an increase in thinking about investment, but for the most part, we do have stockpiles of cash in several clients. And then I've said this before, and I had some of the smaller clients say, well, I wish I had a stockpile of cash, but they're not struggling as much as they were before. Either way, cash is still king because perception is reality. Next, we're in an information overloaded society. So who doesn't walk into work anymore and have a couple hundred emails waiting for them? Well, that's just sort of normal. And before that even happened, they probably had 8,000 messages showing up on their phone and on their Facebook and LinkedIn, social media, and just all around them as they're driving to work, the radio. I mean, we have more information coming at us. And from a work standpoint, there's more information coming out of our ERP systems than ever before that we could access, but who could understand it all and figure out what in the world to do with all this? So it's, and again, time is money. So how do we deal with our information overloaded society? So we'll talk a bit about that as well, because SIOP really focuses on all of these topics. And then increasingly complex needs are occurring today. So certainly we're more of a global economy, which means that we have to find a way to coordinate with our customers and suppliers, and even within our internal walls across the globe. And we need to find a process that does that, which SIOP is one of. Of course, we have more regulations and risk, and certainly SIOP addresses all of these. And sustainability is continuing to increase in importance. So to sum up the new normal, I used to say that the baselines were really the summarization here. Cash is king, service is paramount, and execution is everything. And that's still essential. However, it's no longer enough. So instead, now we need to add to those. We need to find a way to innovate. To be dramatic, innovate or die. Well, in today's world, if you're not innovating and you're not finding ways to collaborate, then you will slowly but surely, lose your customer base and or margins, and that's certainly not where any of us want to go. So one way we can find opportunities to innovate, and certainly collaboration is a core theme in SIOP, is through programs like sales and operations planning. And then last but not least, your image will make or break you. Now this is true in many ways. Like when I have talked about social media in the past, everyone can find out everything about you online. It's true about your company as well. But it's also about your face to your customers, your customer service, and all of those pieces add up. And so this is when we look at this summing up of the new normal, SIOP addresses all of these pieces. So how do we succeed in today's new normal? We don't want to just survive. Surviving is, good for a period of time, but really we want to thrive. And so we really need to find ways to provide exceptional service at a high value and return for the customer, so they feel like they're getting more for less, and at higher margins for us. So we are also getting improved rates. So to find these three things, which many might think are in conflict, we need to find a way to create a competitive advantage, and we need to find a way to make it an and situation where we can find all of these as a win-win-win. And SIOP is undoubtedly been proven as one of those processes and tools to achieve that. So what is SIOP, since we've been talking about this? First of all, SIOP stands for Sales, Inventory, and Operations Planning. As I said, it's sometimes just called S and sign OP. However, most of my clients in today's environment would prefer calling it SIOP because they don't want to forget about the inventory component, as cash is king. So SIOP is a monthly process to balance supply with demand. And we will show you some diagrams in a bit, but just think about it this way. What do our customers expect to sell? Or what are we expecting for them to purchase from us? And how do we best balance our supply with that so that we not only optimize our inventory, but our margins and our service performance so that we, in essence, affect every area of our organization? That's really what is the crux of what sales and operations planning is about. Of course, it's never that easy, but that's really the crux of the matter. So we end up producing a sales plan and an operations plan as an output from sales and operations planning. Sales and operations planning, to be distinctive, focuses more on volume. So we're looking at the high level, and by focusing on volume and aligning supply with demand, mix issues become less important than they do when you're not doing a process like sales and operations planning. And I'll talk more about that as I talk details. The sales plan and the operations plan are typically expressed in units and dollars because both are critical for different reasons when looking at a SIOP process. It also links strategy, which flows into the business plan. Those two things companies tend to do okay with the detailed processes. And the detailed processes mean, what do I run on what production line? What do I purchase? What do I do on a daily basis? How do we link those two things together? That's SIOP. And oftentimes missing, which is problematic. As you can imagine, if your detailed processes are doing one thing, maybe with the best intentions, but aren't aligning to your business plan, you have problems. It's also a method to understand demand and translate it into action. So it's somewhat saying the same thing I've been saying, but if we can understand what our demand is, which has a little bit of a distinction from a forecast, but in essence, what do we expect our total demand to be from our customers, our internal customers, etc. And what does that mean, and what do we need to do? Are we set up properly and most effectively to achieve it? It's also cross-functional and collaborative. So as I said, in today's environment, I am definitely seeing that the companies that are collaborative and focus on collaboration, even if they think it's touchy-feely, it's odd possibly, but it's proven true, is those that are focused on collaboration in general and believe in relationship businesses and are focusing on partnering and like win-win instead of win-lose, are performing better. It's interesting, like a year ago and recently I went to a manufacturing summit in the local area that I live and work in, and some companies that have had dramatic growth are those that believe in collaboration. So it's just interesting that I'm continually seeing that trend. And it's a common plan. So this is like the trick, right? I mean, you can even balance demand with supply because that's more number-oriented. But how do you get everybody on one page? That's really the key to succeeding. As a plan for running your business, of course, if everybody's on one page, you have a path forward. So this is sort of a graphical representation of what I've been talking about. You're balancing your demand with your supply. So the one that's depicted here is, your customer needs are down, yet we have way too much supply. So what that means probably is resulting with too much inventory and other numerous problems, which we could talk about for hours and hours. But in essence, what we're looking to do here is best estimate demand, and there are many ways to do that, and then align it with supply, and then optimize that equation so that we can not only improve service levels, we can improve turnaround times, which is lead times, we can improve inventory turns, we can improve collaboration, margins, and efficiencies. As I said previously, what else do you want? And we involve everyone. It's got to involve all of our internal functions and our customers and suppliers. The next picture kind of shows you how SIOP fits in the middle of everything. So the left side of this is really like all sorts of customer input. So, you know, backlog, and some people call these different things, but basically backlog, customer contracts, forecasts, ship histories, return and repair histories, those kinds of things, market intelligence, are inputs into SIOP. And then also, we have, of course, our stakeholders, our customer service, sales and marketing, finance, engineering, all the people that are on the demand side of the equation, and then the supply side as well, with production material planning, inventory management, procurement, etc. So we have all of our stakeholders giving inputs and receiving inputs from SIOP to provide some key outputs. The key outputs really are, what's your production plan? How about your purchasing plan? Inventory investment plan, and our integrated sales plan. So, like I said, it's really a way to, a great tool for running your business. The next slide shows a process for executive SIOP, and we'll go into this in more detail, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But if you think about the major steps in implementing sales, inventory, and operations planning, first you have to gather some data. Don't get stuck here, as many people have, and I've seen this happen. You know, you do analysis paralysis, can't figure out how to get the data, and you meet and you review data, and yet nothing occurs. That's a useless SIOP process, and don't even bother. But gathering some key data about your top customers and your capacity data, etc., is important. Where should you even focus? And start with SIOP is a good place to start. So what's maybe what's 80% of your customer volume in terms of dollars, in terms of units? Second step is to develop a demand plan. So that means, what do you expect your customers and your internal customers, all of your customers, demand to be? And for what time frames in the future? And typically with SIOP, you want to look long term. So you could even develop your demand plan in greater levels of detail, and you will develop it in greater levels of detail as you get to a shorter term data. So within the next week, certainly you're going to have great detail. Within the next month, you should have really good detail. Within the next quarter, you're going to actually have pretty decent detail as well, and then you could go out. It depends on your business, but I've typically seen between 1 to 3 years for a SIOP process. In today's environment, with as much volatility as there is, beyond 2 years is, most things change. But so really 1 to 2 years, 18 months to 2 years is really what I see. And then we have supply planning. So how, what is happening what does the demand plan mean from a capacity standpoint, staffing standpoint, production plans, purchase plans, etc. Then you get together in a pre-meeting, which brings together the demand and the supply to understand if they align and how things sync up and what key decisions need to be made and recommendations need to be provided to the executive meeting. And the executive meeting is where all of this comes together in one meeting with all the core functions so that, again, we can get everybody on one page with one plan and come out with those 4 things we talked about earlier, the business plan, the production plan, the procurement plan, sales plan, etc. So these are the basic steps, and we'll go into more detail on these in our best practice section. So as a recap, because I'll go through this relatively rapidly because we've talked about it, but why implement SIOP? Of course, improved service and inventory, like I said, are really the top 2 reasons that I see most clients pursuing SIOP. Shorter lead times, as I said, what could be more important in today's environment? more stable production rates and less overtime. Now we're coming to efficiencies and margins, better visibility into capacity issues. So how can you work these before they become problems and you end up impacting not only service or you end up spending a fortune? Improved communication and teamwork, and greater accountability regarding actual performance to plan. That's another key one, because it's not always, if you don't hold folks accountable, including yourself, and that's what the SIOP process does. It's a process that's holding people accountable. Then you will not get the same results as you would otherwise. And of course, a better balance of demand and supply. Now, to continue on with some more benefits, we have a monthly update to the business plan. Fewer surprises. Most executives I talked to today, this alone would be a significant improvement to their current situation. How many times, unfortunately, do we end up with surprises that if we really would have been tracking what was happening and looking at a macro level, we would have been able to understand them ahead of time and do something to head them off. We're also looking at one set of numbers instead of having a plan that's internally focused for production. Production has their plan, sales has their plan. Executive team has yet another plan that they've conservatively developed, and a different plan yet for the board, and possibly a different plan yet for the public. There's 18 plans going on, and no one knows what to do. So with one set of numbers, greater flexibility to adapt the common game plan. As I said, it really bridges the gap between the business plan and the detailed like planning and scheduling, and so it eliminates the need for as much detail and work on the detailed mixed plans. It provides a window into the future, and it's a great way, I found, to raise bottlenecks. The process itself brings up bottlenecks. They naturally come out of it. So it's no longer he said, she said, and this function doesn't get along with this other function. It has nothing to do with any of that. It has to do with the process is showing that this is the next bottleneck, and how will we go about working on that bottleneck. So next, we will see what is. Go ahead, Julie. Very good. So we have best practices. I was thinking that was next. So we have demand planning. We're going to go through some demand planning, some inventory, some supply planning, and then we'll go through some case studies. So when you look at demand planning, so what is your sales, what do you expect to ship, is one way of looking at this. You want to focus on just your key items, your product groups, your customers, your customer groups. You have to think about this. It's one of the strategy things to think about up front, is don't just immediately think I need to know every item, every SKU in detail, by location, etc. Well, that might be what you need, but oftentimes you can just look at product lines, product groups, maybe customer groups. Could be you have certain market segments of business. So thinking about this before you jump in and just start going at the detailed level and get stuck in analysis paralysis is definitely the way to go. It's for sure the ones that I've seen successful. They may or may not focus on the detailed items here, but it depends on what their capabilities are and a lot of other things. The ones that are successful, folks, think about this up front. You want to think about whether your items are consistent or sporadic. Is the demand all over the place, or is, month to month, do we really pretty much send out the same amount each month within a reasonable tolerance? And sometimes we find that we're wrong about what we think. We think something's sporadic, and it's actually not when you look across time. It's one of the advantages of SIOP is to understand this. So what are the other things that go into demand planning? I've already shown you some diagrams, so I'm just going to go through these relatively rapidly, except for a couple that I think are key to think about. Incorporate your customer information, of course. You want to go and get more customer information, the better. Also, that's not the same necessarily as the market information. So let's say if you're in aerospace, what is the aerospace market doing? Is it growing? Is it declining? What's happening? You also want to go deep into your supply chain. And this is where the collaborative piece comes into play, and I wanted to go into this topic a bit more. I have seen that clients that partner with their customers to get better demand information, which could just mean customer supplied forecasts. Preferably, it's what they actually shipped of our products or sold of our products. And the deeper you can go into your supply chain and get good information as to what is likely to happen, undoubtedly, the more successful you'll be in SIOP and with your business performance. So that's a key one there. And I would not stop at historical data, although you have to start with there. You have to start with historical data as a base. It's helpful to put this in perspective. If you get some wild information from your customers, which has been prone to happen, you have to know whether or not this is rational or not according to your customer data, and perhaps go back to them and talk with them about it. Really, do you expect a 40% decline in your business, or most likely, if you've had poor service, a 40% increase in business? And the reason is not because they're expecting to increase business, but because they think that they can't get products from you anyway. They may as well increase it, so they hope they get some. So if you really plan for 40% more, is that going to be helpful? Probably not. You'll even perform worse. So you need to find these things out. You want to, of course, if seasonality, trend, other factors, forecasting softwares will handle that for you, and it's not terribly complicated. You can do it on your own as well. New products is always a dilemma for SIOP processes, because new products are by definition harder to forecast. But you still have to put something, put an estimate together of some sort. And of course, pricing can affect your demand plans. I mean, are you really focusing on demand plans for all the customers that lose money continually? Should you be? Look at pricing and margins, those kinds of things. Frequency, as I said, you should be looking out at your demand plan probably 18 to 24 months. And further out, you can go in more aggregate levels. Nearer term, you need to have more details so you know what to do. And you should be reviewing this. Depends on your market, but at a minimum, you have to review it monthly as part of the SIOP process. For sure monthly. Sometimes it requires, weekly. It depends. Or maybe there's A, B, C items, and you focus different time frames depending on the types of items you're looking at. All right, so inventory strategy is next. And the reason is that in order to determine your supply plans, you need to know what you're doing with inventory. So you have to think about your strategy. So this is not details yet, but just thinking your strategy. Do you want to do, first of all, make versus buy decisions come into the SIOP process? And you provide recommendations on those. You want to define demand plan items. So relatively consistent items, you can put a demand plan out there and produce to the demand plan because they're relatively consistent. If you produce to a demand plan and the customer changes its mind, then it's not a tragedy because it's likely that it's just a spike in their volume and it'll be fine for the next month. So demand planning is best for consistent items. If you find that an item is truly sporadic, you don't want to demand plan those items. You want to get as much information as you can from the customer, but you pretty much make to order on those items. And then you want to associate your lead times with these systems. So obviously on your demand plan items, you can most likely shorten up your lead times. On make-to-order items, it's going to have to be the lead time that's associated with what it will take to put that order together. And of course, you can maybe strategically place materials and those kinds of things in inventory if they support more than just your make-to-order items. But nevertheless, it's going to be the longest lead time for those. Then you want to determine strategic inventory requirements. So even if something is not an important item, if it's for a key customer, that might be worth considering from an inventory perspective. So you got to look at strategic inventory requirements. And then you also, as I talked earlier, you want to look at vendor-managed inventory, collaborative customer programs. So one way to move in your supply chain to get better demand information is to just do it for them. So I've done this in multiple types of clients, like healthcare products, several aerospace clients. Like, for example, Boeing is a good example. They're usually a customer of my clients, and there's several others I could name, Gulfstream, etc., that will partner with you so that you can figure out what your customers need at each of their locations for them according to their demand data and the best information you have, which allows you to provide a win-win. Better service for them, lower inventory levels for them, and lower inventory levels for you at greater margins. So that's the idea of these collaborative customer programs, and I think that they are one of those secrets to success, although they've been in place forever, for a very long time. they're very rarely used effectively. All right, so the next slide on inventory will be make to order. So if you've decided that your product is sporadic and needs to be make to order, you only hold inventory if the customer has, you've agreed with your customer to do so. And for raw material and purchased items, you want to hold inventory if your lead time is greater than your lead time to the customer. And that's it. For make to order items, they're literally make to order, so it's the only reasons you hold inventory. For make to stock items, you want to hold inventory, again, if you have customer contracts, if there's volatility of demand. So even though it's consistent, it's still a little bit, sporadic within, how do you put this? It's a bit volatile within the relatively consistent pattern. So you want to establish a safety stock that's the difference between your average monthly demand and the highest or lowest delta. So you want to cover for those differences. Known causes of poor planning on the part of the customer. Well, I'm sure we've all had many examples of those, and I won't mention them because it depends on the client and the customers, but for sure there are certain customers that are known to have poor planning systems, which makes them volatile and other issues that arise, but yet they have make-to-stock items. And so you need, in those cases, to hold inventory to make sure you're successful. And then, of course, you also level load. So we haven't really talked about this yet. So one of the ways that you align your demand with your supply, your demand is your demand. So let's just say that it's not going to be totally consistent from week to week, month to month, etc. Certainly not by when you start to look down at machine groups that you might be running at on the floor. So you want to level load your operations and your purchasing plans so that you can have improved margins, which will add some inventory to your system where it makes sense. But it's not going to add significant inventory if you optimize that equation well, and it will provide significant benefit. So on WIP inventory, so work in process, it's pretty much as simple as this. You want to plan for the amount of time it takes in order to be completed in the production area. So simple as that. And for raw materials, we want to hold inventory if lead time is greater than your frozen time period, so it's similar to what we said earlier. And if you have yield issues, meaning like when you try to produce, let's just say 20 of an item, you typically have scrap or quality issues, etc., that mean that you have to really start by producing 25 in order to get 20. Those are yield issues. Vendor performance issues. So your supplier says they will deliver it in 3 weeks, but consistently they deliver it within plus or minus 50%. Maybe it might take them an extra week. Well, you're going to have to put that in inventory. All right, so that moves on. So we have the demand side, the inventory strategy side, and that leads us to our supply planning operations. So here's where you want to say, okay, our demand plan is X. We've maybe level loaded it to optimize things. So what is our capacity constraint? So at the high level and volume level, we should have some idea. You don't have to know in detail, but you have to at least do rough cut capacity planning to understand, are there any machines, suppliers, etc., which are overloaded and need to be addressed, or possibly way underloaded, and there might be opportunities to make some changes, run some other things there, etc. So understanding your capacity is one of the key advantages of SIOP. Also, when you put your demand and supply strategies together, you want to look at a combination of optimization here, right? So you want to look at make to order, make to stock. What service level are you looking to achieve? Because 100% service might sound great, but it really is not, because that would require an inordinate amount of inventory. But what many people I work with look at 98% inventory, or service, I should say, for their customer base in general, and like 99% service for key customers or key items. Inventory targets, so cash is not bountiful. We need to make sure we're looking at what our inventory targets are, and our customer lead time. So we put all that together along with the level loading, and you translate your demand plan into a master schedule. And so that's looking at like what mix of items will you produce during what time frames, and they could be in they're not going to be in the detailed daily schedules. This is still a higher level. So you're looking at the master schedule of mix and level loading. And then you want to translate those into detailed production plans and schedules, which many times prior to SIOP, you're stuck right here managing excessive amounts of details. And then you want to analyze any critical work centers, production lines, etc. So it's not just from a capacity side, but how can we optimize our staffing, our overtime, our cross-training, etc. What is the impact on support departments like maintenance and other folks like that? How do we leverage our equipment and our tooling plans? It also can give us our capital expenditure requests. So do we need new machines? Do we need to upgrade machines? Do we need to add capabilities? What do we need to do? And then how do we build in flexibility? And we want to, of course, leave some room in our plan. You don't want to plan your master schedule to 100%, because then what are you going to do about your make-to-order items? So you want to make sure that you're thinking about, what's the right percentage to plan to. Now, on the next slide, we have our procurement. So similar to operations, I'm going to go through this pretty quick. We want to translate our production plans into material plans and purchase plans. Of course, this will give us a way to work and partner with our supplier to produce long-term contracts, and will allow us to negotiate pricing and lead times, but we can make these into win-wins, which I've seen in one of my clients, a 10% improvement in margins due to this, due to SIOP, and it came largely through this area. All right, then we have, next is logistics. So many times this isn't even talked about, but really you can do a lot on your logistics network and setting up your supply chain network through looking at your SIOP plans. So what is your shipping plans, your receiving plans, your warehousing plans, inter-branch transfer plans, transportation plans? How do you optimize all of these areas from a margin perspective and from a service perspective? So there's many things to be thinking about when you look at logistics. It's just not one of the first things that you do, because you have to first start with what is my demand plan and what does that mean from a supply plan, and then go from there. So on the inventory side, so we did inventory strategy, but the I in SIOP is for your inventory plan. So what does that mean? Based upon our sales plan and our production plans and our purchase plans, what's the resulting inventory plan? And is that in line with our goals? If not, maybe we need to re-optimize our equation. And of course, slow-moving and obsolete inventory reserves all come up throughout this process. So when you're preparing for an executive meeting, so like I said, we want to, now, not all these have to be meetings. They can be conversations. It depends on the size of the company, the formality, etc. But you have your demand plan, your operations plan, your pre-meeting to put them together, and then your executive meeting. And the executive meeting is where you have everybody from that heads each of the functional areas at. So demand planning, I have gone through both of these. The demand plan and supply plan would include the usual suspects, meaning like customer service, sales, your core SIOP participants in your demand planning meeting. In the supply planning, you want to have operations and procurement, any related areas that are needed, and the person that's doing your demand plan, so they can understand how, where it's coming from. Your pre-SIOP gets those key people together, and then your executive meeting is where you get the executives, like I said, the heads of each functions together to review and come into alignment on one plan. So when you review on the demand plan, I think I've talked about a lot of this, so I'm going to go through these rapidly. So really, when you look at your demand plan from the executive SIOP side, you're reviewing your demand plan versus your sales budgets and your historical performance to give the executives an idea of where things stand. And really, you're focusing on changes in your demand plan. So have customers increased or decreased in terms of their demand versus last month? Those are the areas you need to focus on. Don't worry about all the rest of the stuff. And then thinking about key customers, and what are your customers saying? How are they thinking you're doing? Those are the kinds of things you want to look at in the demand side. On the executive side review from the supply side, we have the supply plan versus actual. We have the key thing we look at here is Any changes in the demand plan, what are the resulting changes we need to make in the supply plan, and how do we optimize for that? So capacity, staffing, key bottlenecks. You want to look at your master schedule attainment. So did you attain what you expected to do? Your variance is the plan, which goes to your efficiencies and margins. All of this is going to come out, so you can see why this is such a core process to business. And then, of course, from an inventory perspective, that should result in an inventory plan. So, of course, your inventory plan is never going to be 100% accurate at the detailed SKU level. So why not? You know, what are the core reasons and action plans? That's true for all of these areas. So some of the metrics that I've been talking about, but I've given you a list here so you can think through it. Forecast accuracy, gross margin versus plan, on-time delivery performance. You know, really the key thing here is to think about root cause analysis and resulting action plans. The whole point of SIOP is not to get together and review information and do nothing for the next month. It's actually supposed to be a cultural change where you have interactive discussions, make key decisions, and have resulting action plans that you get together with and continually improve the performance of your business. And that's why it can have significant impact on your bottom line. So when you look at implementing SIOP, I wanted to at least include one slide on this topic. SIOP, like any other significant cultural change project, like that you've ever been through, merger and acquisition, those kinds of things, doesn't typically fail in its formulation. So your demand plan not being perfect is never the cause, or you have to see it anyway, be the cause of a problem. It's going to fail in implementation because we're talking about significant cultural change and process change throughout your organization. As my HR mentor used to say, it begins and ends with leadership. And that is true with SIOP as well. This is one initiative that has to have executive buy-in. Because after all, how will you have an executive meeting if no executives show up? And since in every company I've ever consulted with or worked for, executives are required to make some of these decisions I've been talking about. I mean, they're not going to purchase multi-million-dollar machines and implement programs that affect critical customers if they don't understand what's happening and agree with it. So it has to start at the top. Your SIOP team, I've already talked about who's included there, but it's really a cross-functional team and can easily include your customers and suppliers and should include your customers and suppliers to a degree. So when it pertains to them, you're talking with them, of course, about only their information and maybe where they, you know, like them versus the market, et cetera, just to get a better feel. You want to, when you roll it out, you want to start by educating folks on what this even means. Because they're involved in something that's going to make a significant impact on the business, and they can have a significant, they themselves can have a impact on what happens in the company. Every role is valuable when it comes to SIOP. So we really want folks to understand that. You want to pilot the process with maybe one product line or one customer, whatever makes sense in your business, and then roll it out from there. And of course, data support is going to come into play. There's a lot of ways to go here, and there's no need for fancy software the majority of the time, but you do need to consider that and have IT support. So I think I'm going to just pick out one or two of these and then open it up to questions. So let's see which one would be good. A mid-market manufacturer wanted to reduce inventory and improve the company's value in preparation for a sale. In this case, it was in preparation for a sale. However, what executive team doesn't want to improve the value of the company? So it really is a kind of a across-the-board kind of an example. So in this case, we actually, that's the other thing I'd really like to say, is you don't have to have a formal SIOP or S&OP program, because that can sometimes be scary, especially when you're at the very beginning stages. So you can do the same thing and just not call it SIOP. Just start talking about what do we expect our customers to be, what do we expect to sell to customers? It's a good place to start. And that's what we did there. So what do we expect that to be? What's our demand? And then just getting everybody together on how will we supply that and which facility will do what and how will we share inventory led to a 30% reduction in inventory Well, they had good service in this case already, or excellent service in this case, so they maintained service levels, and it improved the value of the business. I mean, obviously we can optimize and both margins, efficiencies, etc. So it did improve the value of the business, and they were able, in this case, they were able to sell it off. So another one, we'll talk about service, because that's probably another good one. An aerospace manufacturer had to bring up service levels rapidly to support key customers. Well, I've seen, undoubtedly, in the last 2-3 years, most companies are going into SIOP because either they want to bring up their service levels, maybe they went into the wrong types of products during the recession and cut back in the wrong areas, so they have a service issue, or they need to improve upon their lead times, not from because they're in a bad shape, but just because they need to innovate and take things to the next level to ensure that they can grow their sales in today's environment. So in this case, we did do a formal process, but actually have worked with several customers, and so some of them did not do a formal process. And the process is really the same. It's just a matter of the words we used. So again, we start with the demand plan, got a better picture, and in many of the cases I've worked with, it's interesting. We can always get more demand data, forecast data from their customers. Just even picking up the phone and talking to customers can reveal inordinately more information than is used in most companies today. So we got a better picture of demand, and we're able to look at what do the supply plans mean, and how do we level load a production schedule so that we can address capacity bottlenecks, which is a key problem in almost every of these service issues clients. And then we were able to, in all cases, we brought up service significantly, and or if service was already high, we were able to take time out of the system, and we were able to reduce our lead times. So I have a couple questions here, but I think, Julie, let's see if we have questions from the phones, and if not, we'll go on.
Okay. Right now we're doing questions by the chat box. So I'm sorry, the question box or the chat box, whichever one you prefer. Michael did have a question. What is a mix plan?
So what I mean by mix is that when we have different products, you can look across, and you may have different, well, let me think of how I can put this. So basically there's different product groupings, and they might be produced differently, and or you have a product mix. So some of them may take significantly longer to produce, or might require significantly different or more complex needs to produce. And so you typically can look at, instead of at the detailed level where you're saying, maybe you have a past due situation and you're managing order by order, line by line, and you're married and buried in the detail. Instead of that, you can bring it up to the next level and just say, how many of this product grouping do I need? So that's what I mean by you can get a better feel for the mix of products at the sales and operations planning level, which then resolves many of those detailed scheduling and planning issues. So it's, your planners and your schedulers have to do a whole lot less work. Many times they can do a whole lot less work because they've done the upfront work to have a better plan for the specific item, the groupings of items that they're going to need to run through the facility or purchase, and they have a better feel for how to make that happen effectively. And then suddenly, all of your little issues disappear. It's funny how it works that way.
Well, and can you expand too on the the level load and mix plan equation? How do those two work together, and how should our listeners be addressing that in their companies?
Sure. So level load is actually easier to describe than mix, because mix I was just trying to describe, which has to do with groups of items. On level loading, what that means is, let's just say on production line number 1 or work center number 1, you have if you were to produce your demand, if your demand plan equaled your production plan, you would produce 10 widgets on day 1, 100 widgets on day 2, 3 widgets on day 3, 50 on day 4, and so on. So you'd have a dramatically different plan each day. So instead of doing that, and it may not be days, you level load really at the master schedule in weeks and months and even quarters. But so instead of doing that, what we do is we'll plan, well, let's just say we had an average of 100 per week. So what we'll do is we'll bring some of the volume forward. So by getting our demand plan, by working with our customers, we're producing some items in advance of when they're needed to ship in order to level out our production and our capacity so that we don't have to have erratic amounts of overtime. One day we have to theoretically fire everyone, and the next day we need 10 people to stay for overtime. So those are the kinds of things that sound ridiculous, and maybe I've given some extreme examples, but I've yet to come across a client that didn't have those types of issues. So instead you try to level load it. And the same thing's true for a purchasing plan. Once you've level loaded the production plan, the purchase plan somewhat level loads on its own, but you also can further level load to your suppliers. And what that means is you don't want to provide your suppliers with an erratic need forecast either. If you can make it more consistent and reliable, your suppliers are likely to give you a better price, because if they don't know what the heck you're doing, they're going to give you the highest price possible because they have to cover for our volatility. So that's what level loading means. And so the master schedule, or the SIOP process, really focuses on how do we level load our demand, which then aligns the demand with the supply and also optimizes it, and it focuses on the correct mix. So if we said we sold 1,000 or I don't know, 1 million part numbers or 1 million items within the month, if 500 of those were significantly more complex items than the other 500, we need to know that we have at least half and half, half complex, half non-complex, or whatever the percentage is. It gives us a much better feel for that, so we can plan appropriately, and then that way the detailed plans are no longer a firefight.
Okay, good. Thank you. Tony raises, I think, just a fundamental question I bet all of us are thinking but maybe not asking. So Tony, thanks for asking this one. He wants to know, how do you hold the sales team accountable for the forecast? And he's noticed that a lot of times you have these process meetings and the sales team tends to avoid even attending them because they might be held accountable for the excess inventory because they didn't make any of the sales like they promised, which leaves supply chain holding the bag. So how do you address that, Lisa, when you've got typical salespeople who are pie in the sky going, well, yeah, I'm going to sell this, and then when push comes to shove, they fall short?
Well, that is a constant, it's one of the key struggles, but it's also the reason you need to have it has to start at the top. Because if the CEO, the board of directors, whoever is at the top, is supportive and understands what the SIOP process will do, they're, just as much as they're not going to hold an operations person responsible for the minutia of detail of, you were supposed to produce 20 today and you produced 18, so now everything has gone to hell in a handbasket or something. They're not going to do the same on the sales side. So what that means is we need to establish direction, which means that just forecasting is important. Now, with that said, you also want to look at tolerances and what makes sense. What can you achieve with your customer base? So I've seen that so long as people have an understanding of why they're doing this, the executive team supports it, and more importantly, the executive team asks those questions. So instead of asking questions every day about how much additional sales volume did you get, you might ask that question and also ask, and how did that, have you gotten any forecast information for your customers? Have you set up any customer partnership programs with customers? It's more about what you measure is what you get. So asking those right questions. The nice thing about the SIOP process is it brings those questions to light without putting people in conflict, because that's part of the problem, is like I think Tony was referring to, is oftentimes it is true pre-SIOP that supply chain is holding the bag because of course we need to increase our sales revenues, And so sales sells what it can sell. So instead, what we need to do is, the better we can align them up front and ask the right questions up front, the process itself, which this is something that I didn't expect when I first started this, is I was still expecting that the people in the process would have to bring up these contentious areas. What I found is that although you have to have the right people there, and of course it's not like it's perfect, people still are people, but the process and so long as you're measuring the right data and you agree upon a plan in the executive meetings, the next meeting you come to, you have problems with the sales forecast. You don't say, well, oh no, sales executive, you're the problem. You say, so what else can we do? What other information do you need? How can we help you? Which is the same thing we should be saying on operations side when we miss our production plans and we're running a bunch of overtime and yet still not servicing customers. So it's asking the right questions and getting the right people involved up front.
Okay. And on kind of the same bent, Erica's asking the question, can you give an example of a post-planning review for a new item that launches during the SIOP process, SIOP process?
Well, that is the other issue that always comes up with SIOP meetings, is you get the basics in place first, and then new items and new launch items are always problematic. With that said, what I've seen to work is that the most important thing is to include it in the process. Don't allow, well, I have no idea, we've never sold it before, so therefore I have no clue what the forecast could be. I mean, it's all in a matter of putting together the best estimates you can, and if you have no idea, literally, maybe we need to be talking to our customers more to get a better feel for what might be at least rational. And then, following up is a key part of this, because one of the things about SIOP is that you put together the plans, and then most importantly, you don't review plans every time. You review changes to the plans and exceptions to the plan. So if you've had issues with your new product launch, let's just say, you want to start breaking that down into key reasons and reason codes as to why and what you can do about it.
Okay, great. And we ran just a little over today. So, Lisa, there's just a conclusion slide here. I don't know if you want to, wrap it up with that. Okay.
Sure, absolutely. So, as I've emphasized, we're really trying to balance demand with supply. Establishing the one common plan is really what most of the questions centered around, which doesn't surprise me, because that's why I say you can have the best data gurus in the world and even get great data together and great presentations together for the executive SIOP meeting, and yet if you don't really agree on one common plan, you haven't achieved anything. So you may as well not do it because you just wasted a bunch of time. You want to be strategic, gain momentum early on. Think about it as a cultural change. If you do all those, then your bottom line impacts will follow. So don't think about those in the beginning. They will, I guarantee you, they'll follow if you do all the right things.
Okay. And here, put up Lisa's contact information. I very much want to thank Lisa for helping us learn more about how we can use SIOP in our organizations. Unfortunately, that's the conclusion of our webinar today. We certainly appreciate your time, and we look forward to providing you with more useful information in the future. Lisa's contact information is on there, but you know what, Lisa, I think there's a little typo here, LMA-consulting group. So it's Lisa L. Anderson at LMA-consultinggroup.com. Again, thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to presenting more webinars to you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.